Hi there. Well, we could be in for a long one this week. We are talking about how to teach academic English, and there are a lot of topics to cover. So before we begin, if you would like to grab yourself a coffee, popcorn, or beer, or whatever you like, pause the video now and go and grab yourself something. When we talk about academic English, we often think about content-based language teaching, or CBLT. You should remember that in this course, I use CBLT because the primary goal is to understand about how to teach English, and the secondary goal is to improve your language skills. Notice that it says halfway down on page 179 that many language learners and teachers do not have the luxury of true content-based language classes. So you should consider yourself lucky to be part of this course. So when you see me in our next class, don't forget to say, "Adrian, we love you, and you are the greatest teacher ever." So with that, shall we begin? Here is our schedule for today. As you can see, we have a mountain of topics to cover this week. So I'm not going to be telling any silly jokes or using any old kangaroo pictures. Absolutely no jokes or silly business going on here. Let's move on to our first discussion topic. I bet you know what it is. I understand this has become a little predictable, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having one or two aspects of teaching that are predictable. In fact, this often makes students feel comfortable as they get used to your teaching style. Well, what do? You are not just learners of language, but looking to become teachers of language. So you need to think how you can take your own language skills to the next level. How do you try to improve your academic language skills? Note that this can also include what you may read or listen to, speak or write just for fun or out of interest, rather than for the sole purpose of improving your English proficiency. As I said, there are many advantages of using CBLT. Such courses include many experiences associated with successful language learning. There are also many things to consider when taking on the challenge of conducting a CBLT class. Teachers need to provide scaffolding through supplying vocabulary and sentence structures students may struggle with. On pages 180 and 181, there are 5 concepts associated with teaching academic English. Make sure you understand all the concepts, but especially the third, BICS, and fourth, CULP, as these two are commonly referred to in discussions about academic English. What makes it difficult to develop our academic language skills is that in reality, we really have few opportunities to experience abstract varieties of English. Dr. Jim Cummins, a researcher at the University of Toronto, argued that learners need to develop 2 varieties of language skills. Cummins coined these skills Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, or BICS, and Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, or CALP. BICS refers to the everyday, here and now language that we commonly use when talking to family and friends. CALP, on the other hand, is the more abstract language used in academic classes, like this class. Although new English learners can develop a fairly decent level of BICS in about 1 year of full exposure to English, to reach a satisfactory level of CALP usually takes 5 to 7 years, and learners need to have strong academic backing in their first language in order for it to develop in the L2. If you want to be successful in the L2, not just for daily conversations, but in work as well, you will need to improve your language skills, cognitive abilities, and knowledge of content learned in various subjects at school. It is not an easy task. Now, if you don't trust me, or you think my explanation of the difference between BICS and CALP is not good enough, scan this QR code here, and you can listen to Dr. Jim Cummins himself explain the differences. Isn't that important for you now, But we'll have a quick look anyway, because knowledge is the water of life. No, that doesn't make sense. Water is the water of life, isn't it? Anyway, there is a possibility that in the future you will teach someone like this, so let's have a look. Generation 1.5, which is kind of an unfortunate name, refers to people who are similar to both first and second generation immigrants to the United States. This means that although they have strong BICS, they struggle with CULP. This makes it difficult for them when it comes to learning in an L2 environment. Because they speak their first language much better than they can read or write it, they struggle to develop CULP in both their L1 and L2. You may see these kinds of students in, for example, children whose parents are Japanese but moved to the United States when they were around 10 years old. At home they speak Japanese but haven't kept up their writing and reading. At school they can converse well enough but struggle with more advanced reading and writing. As I said, this isn't that important for us now, but it's still good to know. Let's keep going. Are you keeping with me? There's still a long way to go, so hang in there. Let's look at another advantage of CBLT. With content classes, there is a greater contextualization of input. That is, the topics are always very clear, and students are able to look at the upcoming chapter before class to help them prepare. Teachers also often use warm-up activities that are related to the topic of the lesson in order to activate students' schemata. Oral interactions in content classes are authentic because it is important for everyone to understand what is being said. And finally, teachers are able to predict the kind of questions and statements their students will produce, as well as difficulties students will have in class. As a result, teachers can provide better scaffolding and feedback for students. A lot of these ideas suggest that preparing for class is very important. In your opinion, which is more important as a student? Preparation for class? Yoshu, right? Or reviewing a class? Fukushu. Prepare your opinions and ideas and be ready to share them in class. Although we have discussed many advantages of CBLT, it is not all smooth sailing. It is extremely difficult for teachers to offer appropriate levels of language in these classes. To make it easier for students to develop their language skills in CBLT classes, there are a few hints on page 185 to 188 about improving students' language skills in CBLT classes. First, it is a good idea to make learning objectives, both linguistic and content objectives, clear to students. The language-related goals are usually centered around grammar structures or the kinds of things learners need to communicate. I guess in these videos, I make the content goals kind of clear, but the goals related to language are not so clear, are they? Second, we need to think about the level of reading and listening that students are provided with. Listening input can be made easier to understand by using foreigner talk. In our class, I want to keep the language as natural as possible, so in order to make everything a little easier for you to comprehend, I decided to flip this class and add the closed captions to the videos. I hope doing this has made the content easier for you to understand. Third, content courses include a lot of discussion. Obviously, this is true for this course too. However, discussions can be a little difficult, especially if you find yourself in a situation where you have a mix of native speakers and non-native speakers. The native speakers may dominate the discussion. If you happen to be asked to conduct a CBLT class, you can assume the learners will have a high level of proficiency in BICS. Therefore, as a teacher, you need to consider how to improve the reading and writing skills of your students. Oh, of course, their understanding of the content as well. When it comes to reading, it can be especially difficult for students, as the words they see can be very different from the normal everyday language they are used to. Because of this, a bilingual dictionary is an essential aid for students to have on them. There are 10 great tips on page 189 you need to look at. Have a look, highlight the important parts, and think how these tips can help you both as a teacher and as a student in a CBLT class. Next, we have writing. As we said in the previous chapter and video, good speaking ability does not necessarily lead to good writing ability. Academic writing is more than just putting your ideas onto paper. It requires synthesis, analysis, problem solving, and other skills that are cognitively demanding. Encouraging students to get a handle of the use of transition words and phrases to show the readers the connections the writer sees between and among the ideas is one way of helping them improve their academic writing skills. It's not easy, is it? In fact, this chapter isn't easy either. Ganbare! Back in chapter 3, we talked a little about task-based language teaching, or TBLT. Personally, I really like this way of teaching, as it takes the focus of learning beyond just language aspects and brings more realistic goals to the class. Information gap exercises are often used in TBLT and can also be used in CBLT as well. Tasks can be done individually, in pairs, or in groups. In an academic classroom, it is often a good idea to start with a listening or speaking task, and then move on to reading and writing. The example of a task on page 193 is really good, and I highly recommend you have a look. We've learned in this chapter that content classes should focus on both language and content objectives. On pages 193 and 194, we see a few guidelines to help do this. First, we need to understand the level of our students. That is, how much do they already know about the content area, and to what degree has their CULP language developed? We mentioned before that we need to integrate the 4 skills when teaching, and this is also true for CBLT. Choose tasks that involve a variety of language skills. Providing a little input through listening or reading activities first will give students models on which they can base their own output later. We should remind our students of the importance of learning and communication strategies. Remember that passing on learning strategies is one of the biggest responsibilities of teachers. We should also include problem-solving tasks, getting students to think deeply and firing up a bit of active learning to make your classes more meaningful. Finally, we need to apply the SIOP model and COLA, which we will have a brief look at in 2 slides' time. As always, here I would like you to design your own tasks to be used in an academic setting. Note that I would like these to be tasks, not just activities. Go back and have a look at the idea on page 193 to see an example. There are also some ideas on pages 195 and 196, so make sure you read through them as well. We're getting towards the end of this course, so I really expect you to have some creative, interesting, and original tasks ready to share with your peers in class. We saw 2 slides ago about the importance of applying the SIOP model, which was talked about way back in chapter 3, and the Cognitive Academic Language Learning Approach, or COLA, to academic classrooms. COLA is widely used in CBLT, and it emphasizes the dual nature of academic concepts in learning and academic language. There are 3 main components to consider. 1. Topics should be chosen from major context subjects. 2. Teachers should help students with their development of academic language and literacy. And 3. there should be very clear instructions of both content and language learning strategies. If you would like to hear more from Anna Yule-Chameau about CALLA, scan this QR code and you can watch a 6-minute talk by the lady herself. Finally, we get down to assessment. Like previous language skills, the use of a rubric is really helpful in academic English as well. Many teachers separate language and content into 2 different rubrics, but it is so hard to look at them separately, so as the author says, it is best to just put them together and assess them in one rubric. Content is going to be a major factor in CBLT, of course. So if you like, you can put a heavier weighting on that component. Lastly, it should be said that observing students on a daily basis is also important. This will allow you to give feedback on strategies and attitudes which are difficult to measure in a rubric. So that is it for this week. That really was a journey, wasn't it? Maybe you are feeling like the little engine that could, but I knew you'd get there. Make sure you go back and review the places you weren't sure of, highlight the places you felt were most important in the textbook, get your ideas prepared for class, and make sure you're ready to rock and roll for the test. Bye.